move our overlay. It'd be pretty funny. It would be pretty funny if I left this overlay over our show the whole time. Like I just didn't realize that I didn't remove it.
It's like the curtain. People are just hearing us from behind the scenes.
Exactly. We're behind the curtain.
Look anyway.
If they only knew what was behind the curtain.
Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain.
Exactly.
Aaron Rodgers smelling the heat, the dead heat off of the bodies of his wilted teammates in Jacksonville.
Right. Or just the smell of garbage in the streets of New Orleans. But that's a whole different story. It reminds me too of the Wizard of Oz. Like we all see a movie when we were kids about don't believe the man behind the curtain. Mm-hmm. They make sure that we get it. Well, we're going to come out behind the curtain here, folks. Now, welcome back. Thursday night. Sigmund Bloom here, hosting. Cecil Lammy going to be on assignment this year on Thursday night, so I get to drive, which means you get me directing Matt Waldman, Dr. Dean Bramall, and so happy that every Thursday night we're going to be joined by Chris Allen. So before we jump in and pepper Dr. Dean with questions, because he likes it so much, Matt Waldman, give us an NFC least showdown game update.
It's been kind of a fun game for what it is. I mean, Washington's defense is putting pressure on Daniel Jones and that offensive line. We've had some injuries to the offensive line already, which is always tough to see. Had one of their linemen carted off. And then Saquon Barkley back. He ripped off a nice run. He looks quick, he looks agile, he looks ready to go. Antonio Gibson also looks pretty good. He's continuing to develop as a runner, but he has all the athletic ability you want. And I thought he was one of the most advanced runners, or one of the best runners for a raw conceptual player I've seen come into the league as a running back. And then Logan Thomas, who basically went from, as I've joked on Twitter, went from being a metal drummer to an opera singer in the span of his time in the NFL. You got to admire him making some tough catches, along with Diane Brown, who made a tough grab. And then Terry McLaurin, who I joked that I missed on him and I would do it again, because basically he's a guy who claps on the ball, but he had a touchdown catch. He made multiple big catches with awful technique, but still continues to get it done like that at one of the highest levels. You got to admire exceptional players like that. With Taylor Heineke, making plays. The teams are confident in him. Daniel Jones had a long run that some of it was called back. It would have been a touchdown if not for a penalty, but that got him inside field position for them to be able to kick a field goal, because they couldn't get it done in the red zone. And then you had, McKissick at the end, JD McKissick score inside the green zone, on a run after he got them down in a 2-minute drill situation. And you have the Giants, the Washington football team with a lead. And it's a competitive game thus far. We'll see if Daniel Jones can keep it together in the second half the way he didn't do last week against the Broncos. And if that happens, we might have ourselves a ball game in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, some of the same storylines. We talked about this before we came on the air with Daniel Jones. Just his reactions in the pocket. I don't even want to say they're not valid. They're not even present. Sometimes they're just not even a reaction. It's nice to see Jason Garrett running him by design, realizing you got a big, rugged quarterback who's fast, had a touchdown called back by penalty, a little ticky-tack kind of penalty, or we might look at him as a Konami code, hey, Rich Rebar, a Konami code quarterback. It may be one of the only things in this offense that consistently works. You see him looking for Kenny Galladay a little bit more in this one, but the Giants' pass offense is just ugly. And the one touchdown they did get was an extended drive with a roughing the passer penalty by Chase Young. Taylor Heineke's solid. I mean, he's got valid reactions. I mean, his timing is good in the pocket. He just has to stop retreating. They had some trouble early because he was retreating. You can't do that. He's got to iron that out of your game, man. But otherwise, offense is on track. J.D. McKissick getting the touchdown at the end of the first half, which isn't great for fantasy. But what is great for fantasy is listening to what Dr. Gene Bramall tells you. Gene, let's start with Josh Jacobs. Short week of rest. Actually, we can put Josh Jacobs and Marquise Brown together. Let's put them together because it's a short week of rest. They both missed practice today. Jacobs obviously came in a little more banged up than Marquise Brown. Brown seemed to be over his hamstring injury in that game, a different injury for Brown. But how much should them playing on Monday night affect how we look at them and their potential availability for Sunday?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Both of these are a little bit frustrating to try to figure out what's going on. Neither one of them have practiced yet. As you said, you wouldn't necessarily expect Jacobs to practice fully in any given week at this point. He came into the season banged up with a toe situation and now has added an ankle to it and pretty routinely plays through missed practices. But back-to-back missed practices, maybe it's the short week that's an issue, as you're intimating there, but it could be more than that. Neither one of these players had much there wasn't much reporting in the local media about what to make of their Thursday missed practice. I'm more worried about Jacobs than I am Brown right now, but both of those players missing 2 practices in a row is a concern. We'll see what Friday brings, but both of them I think you'd consider questionable at best, even though Jacobs has played through some of these things in the past.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Odell Beckham Jr. Certainly, fantastic player, early in his career, but he has talked about how he doesn't love football anymore. And it's not as much fun as it used to be. It's no longer fun for him. And he was a somewhat unexpected scratch last week. So, you don't have to tie in the narrative that I presented there, Gene. But, certainly can you talk about when you expect to see him back? And I'm kind of saddened that I didn't get to bring up Jacobs, because I always like to make Gene smile when I bring up the Monty Python Knight, because I think that's who he is, basically of the NFL right now. So I had to throw that in there.
It's just a flesh wound.
Yeah.
As always. Yeah, the Beckham thing surprised me last week. I mean, I would, to the point where, one of the few posts I put on Twitter was kind of poking fun at Kevin Stefanski for being the latest intentionally vague coach. And I didn't see any reason, after months and months of Beckham being called a freak in his recovery and being cleared for OTAs and then minicamp and not put on PUP and doing what sounded like was everything that was expected of him in training camp. I don't know what to make of the lack of contact. I mean, there's lots of veteran players that don't take contact until the end, and that's really the last hurdle. That last little bit of mental hurdle, as we talked about with Joe Burrow and other players, Cortland Sutton, going through that last little bit of step there. And so maybe it's particularly meaningful to Beckham, but there didn't seem to be any issues with the stability of his knee. We haven't heard about any setbacks. He's still practicing, but to have him ruled out on Wednesday after going down to what was correctly termed by Stefanski a game time decision last Friday night is worrisome to me. And I don't know what the next steps are. At some point, to get over that hurdle, he has to actually practice. So, is there something more going on? Was there a setback that hasn't been reported yet? Are the Browns protecting him in some way? It's really hard to know. So, you ask me, when's he going to play next? And I think there's no way to answer that question. It really doesn't seem like the Browns were concerned enough to think that he was going to miss the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season. Otherwise, they'd have put him on injured reserve. So it feels like a week-to-week situation, but an open-ended week-to-week situation where every week we could potentially say week-to-week until he finally gets back on the practice field, does a little bit more, and is cleared to play. It's telling in some ways that the Browns chose to rule him out on Wednesday, which means they just didn't want to be asked about it all week. I don't know. Just an odd situation. Hopefully we find that he's back for week 3. Looks as good as he was advertised throughout the offseason, and we put this behind him and behind us as far as trying to decide whether or not he can go in a fantasy lineup or not. But something has been unusual about this from the beginning of the season, and I don't think that's going to go away until we learn a little bit more.
So, Dr. Gene, are your spidey senses tingling about Emmanuel Sanders? He looked fine on Sunday. I think he had like one of the deep targets that Josh Allen had taken. So seemed fine on Sunday. Looked like he was limited on practice on Wednesday, but doesn't practice earlier today. I know they say it's just going to be rest, but with the foot injury, and I believe he had surgery on that same foot a number of years ago, but anything, I guess, that we should be concerned about going into week 2?
I think we need to watch it, and you're right to be concerned that the Thursday change in practice is concerning. And I think, I don't remember who it was, but one of the Buffalo beat writers suggested that this was a toe injury. And I kind of went back, and it was intimated that McDermott may have said that, but the press conference in which that tweet came from, there was no mention of a toe there, just that they were being cautious and they didn't expect it to be a longer term issue. So I tried to do a little bit of digging. It sounds like maybe you found some things that I wasn't able to. I'll go back and look a little bit more. If it was the same foot that he had the Jones fracture on many years ago in Pittsburgh, that was my concern toward the end of the preseason when it's being called a foot injury with Sanders. We haven't heard anything about that with him for years and years, but you wonder on wide receivers whether or not that's something that could crop up again on him in the future. So if it's a toe injury, that's something that's going to be difficult to recover from. You'd expect him to get some veteran rest. Friday's practice participation is going to tell the tale. He'll tell the tale here, but I expect him to play this week, and hopefully we won't find out different.
Gene, you're listening to Audible, folks, by the way, Dr. Gene Bramwell taking questions. Gene, let's talk a little bit about Zach Ertz, because we're getting mixed signals, right? He left the game with a hamstring. He came back in. It's no big deal, but now he's missing some practice. And not necessarily that we're playing Ertz, but if you have Dallas Goedert, you're very interested in Ertz status. So is this one of the situations where he may play but not really be a full factor in the passing game as we would expect? How can we discern the mixed signals about Zach Ertz?
Yeah, Philadelphia's situation is weird this week. Wednesday's practice participation report listed every single player as not injured, resting veteran, but a number of them, including Zach Ertz and Miles Sanders, had an injury attached to them. Ertz dealing with a hamstring situation, Miles Sanders dealing with an ankle. There was really no concern about most of those players in the local media from Philadelphia. But we know that Ertz was in and out of last week's game with a hamstring injury. You don't like soft tissue injuries that then limit players in practice. Probably not a major issue there. Ertz was limited on Thursday, but I think there's reason for concern that it doesn't seem like a player that's ready to take a full snap count. And you would think then that Dallas Goedert is able to step in and do at least what he did last week and maybe more. So Friday's practice participation may not be helpful again. As I'm looking at today's, most of it says the same thing. They took the not injury related resting player off a number of players on Thursday. Zach Ertz was not one of them. So it suggests that maybe just a little bit of veteran rest more than anything else. So I don't know that I'm going to be paying as much attention to the practice participation report as I'm on the game status designation. And if he's listed questionable, then I think we need to be concerned. If he's not listed at all, obviously he'll be good to go.
If Josh Jacobs is the knight, has A.J. Brown become his squire?
I'm not too worried about A.J. Brown. A little bit weird to have both knees addressed in the same offseason, but this is what you're going to see. This is going to be, strangely enough, a Julio Jones type situation. So don't be worried if he doesn't practice on Wednesday. If he increases his practice participation by the end of the week and then is not on the injury report on Friday, there's absolutely no concern. If we get to a point where he is chronically on the injury report and then listed questionable, that tells you that there's still some ongoing issues with the knee. And that's not a short-term issue. That's a long-term issue as well for him. You wonder about career longevity if he's already had multiple procedures on his knee and he's not able to practice in the early season. So I don't think there's much concern here. I think we're going to see the Titans give a lot of their players veteran days off, including A.J. Brown, and not too much to be concerned about there.
Johnny Smith popped up on the injury report today with an abdomen issue. I don't know if that would lead to any sort of indication that might be like a core muscle thing or something like that. But I guess what are your thoughts so far, since it just happened earlier today?
Yeah, the concern there is that we never really know exactly what's going on in New England, right? I mean, I think Belichick has been a little bit more forthcoming with his injury reports, and we get some very good beat writers out there that sort of tell us what to think without actually telling us what to think. It being called abdomen in some places and hip in others, you're exactly right. That raises concern for, is this a core muscle situation? Is it something he's going to be able to play through? Or are we going to go through what we've seen with so many players over the years where they struggle for a number of weeks and then finally elect to have surgery, and which would be a 4 to 6 week situation. We saw it with Rashad Bateman, and there's been many others over time. So hopefully that's not what's going on, but I think we'll have a little bit better sense in how many snaps he gets over the next couple of weeks and how effective he is.
You're listening to the Audible or watching, hanging out with us on Thursday night. We'll go one more round with Dr. Gene Bramall. Gene, I'm thinking of Curtis Samuel, but there are other players in general. It's week 2. It's funny that we're talking about injured reserve in redraft leagues, right? This wasn't even a starter as a conversation a few years ago. Now redraft leagues have IR spots. IR can be limited to just 3 weeks. So we have a lot of these guys who went on IR. I'm thinking of Curtis Samuel, but you can bring up whoever comes to mind because it's week 2, week 3 waiver wire. We talk about preemptive pickups on the waiver wire show. Is there anybody that you expect from that initial group of injured reserve guys to be back right on the money, week 3, week 4, ready to go? Or should you still be using your waiver wire money on players that we know are going to play at least next week?
I don't see anybody that looks ready to me. I think Rashad Bateman would probably be the one that you would expect to be closest to full form the soonest. Most of these other players, it's, they're nebulous timeframes in recovery. Everybody that was put on injured reserve this week, from Raheem Mostert to Jerry Jeudy to Ryan Fitzpatrick and Michael Gallup, all of them I have question marks about the initial timetable that was reported. I don't know about Mostert at all. I know that, the thought process here is probably that he had a meniscus repair. Even that's not going to bring him back before the end of the season. Gallup is probably the one that's going to be the closest. I think Jerry Jeudy is likely to be out through the Thursday night game in week 7. It could very well be longer. So I think nobody that I would have on my radar right away that I'd want to do a preemptive pickup a week in advance so that you do have them on the roster for week 4. Bateman is probably the one that's going to come off the soonest. I don't have any indication or hope that Traquan Smith or Curtis Samuel would be coming off soon. And there's not a lot of other players that would be considered fantasy relevant that have been put on injured reserve. So nothing yet. I think we're probably at this point looking week 5 or week 6 before we're really starting to pick players off that list and hope that we see a little bit more from them.
Gene, I want you to look at something for me here, and we're going to try something a little new. But I want you to look at this because Saquon Barkley, I'm a little bit behind, but he looked like he aggravated his knee here. Let's see if I can show it a little bit better. Let's back it up. It's not going to take too long here. Okay. And then they'll show the replay, and you see he's kind of holding the knee up, and he came out for the play. And then they're going to show the replay in a second here. Let's see if I can get it. There's the toss. See how he holds it up there like that? Just wondering if there's anything we could speculate about that. You're on mute.
That's probably good because I didn't have anything very helpful to say anyway. So yeah, I need to go back and refresh my memory which knee was injured.
Okay.
And know where we are there, and I'd want to look at that a little bit more closely. You don't like the non-contact nature of things there, but I don't know if that's a knee. I mean, that could have been an ankle. It's a potential foot thing. I want to look at that a little bit more closely. Just trying to see that on your shared screen there is difficult. So you said it looked like he was holding that right side up in the air there?
Yeah, he was holding the leg, and he could have been the ankle for sure or foot, but
that's
he
definitely
held
the
it
same
very
knee.
stiff.
So the right side is the same knee, and he's back on the field as I'm seeing him right now.
Okay.
And he does look like, I mean, even just in this play where there's a little bit of a false start action here, he's a little bit hopping around on that leg a little bit when he came into play. So I don't know. You would not be surprised to see him have some soreness as he increases his workload and participation. And we're talking about a short week here. So there's some conditioning that still has to be taken care of. And as I was preparing for the show, it looked like, I don't remember who it was. It might have been Dwayne, actually, that put the participation and the snap counts up there and looked like he'd gotten 80% of the snaps and the carries in the first quarter. So if there was anything significant going on with the knee, I don't think he'd be on the field here at all, but it is something I think that we're going to have to watch a little bit. Yeah, he looks pretty good here moving on this play. So probably nothing to be mindful of. Hopefully no issue.
Maybe it's just a hurdle to get over.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we again, just mentioning that with Odell Beckham, but from Barkley to Sutton to Burrow, all of these players have to get back into the, knowing that they're going to take contact from unusual angles and at full speed game contact is this is not a game for the lighthearted.
Gene, one last one on Michael Gallup. I know that we're probably not going to see him till at least October. Can you give us some expectations on what we should think about Gallup when he returns? Is this a calf injury that he'll essentially be able to literally walk back out on the field and get back to his level of play that he was beforehand? Or should we expect a couple more weeks for him to ramp back up? And can we get a few more weeks out of Cedric Wilson or any of the other guys that might be playing behind him?
Yeah, I think when you get that 3 to 5 week timetable there, I think the Cowboys have a bye in week 6 or week 7. And I think the reason you heard 3 to 5 instead of 2 to 4 or 4 to 6 is because that 5th week kind of butts up against that bye week a little bit, and it's given them a little bit of a buffer. So I think what we're going to be looking for there is he returning to a full practice or not? Is he been cleared to run within a couple of weeks? Has he been cleared to fully practice by that 3rd or 4th week spot there? And then if that's the case, I think we see him back before the bye. If not, then yeah, I think you're going to see Cedric Wilson for a period of time. 3 weeks is probably pushing it here. There's a slim chance we see him back for week 5, but it seems to me like this one could go a little bit longer too.
We won't make Dr. Gene's segment go a little bit longer because the world needs Dr. Gene. And he's very gracious to give us his time, his expertise. Again, footballguys.com subscribers get his injury rounds. And Gene, we always enjoy spending time together. Look forward to seeing you again next Thursday.
Good to be with y'all. Enjoy your week. Hopefully the rest of the game goes smoothly here.
Bloom, I got to ask you a question.
Yeah.
In the storied annals of the Audible, we've had Zook, who liked pass rushers.
Right.
So what's going on with yours?
Judy.
What does she seem to like?
Yeah, that's Judy.
She's active.
And she saw her, right? So I just have to, since you brought this up, Judy is like an urban legend. Nobody sees Judy except unless you're in our family. People that have house sat for us have never seen Judy. She is very well concealed and protected at all times unless she totally trusts what's going on. But she gets very upset that I'm here and I'm doing something and not paying attention to her. So I think it was during Saquon Barkley. Maybe she was trying to come in and, cats, you pet them, it calms you, lowers your blood pressure, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe she was coming in to say, we can lower our blood pressure about Saquon Barkley for right now. But Maine Coons, we've talked about Maine Coons. This is, Bob Harris, and I asked Bob, if you were going to obsess about anything but football and fantasy sports, what would it be? He said cats. I told him metal was not a choice. He said cats. And then Zach Law, and we love Zach Law, comes in and says, I would totally listen to a podcast about cats.
And I said, I'd jump
and you would bring
my daughter
too,
had a Maine Coon as well. She had one.
Yeah.
So I'm
Maine Coons are unbelievable. I've said that if they could make a stuffed animal like a Maine Coon, you know what I mean? Every kid would want one. Every kid. It's an animal that was engineered to be adored.
You could give it to cardio patients too, probably.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Huh.
Amazing. Maine Coons are just beyond ridiculously adorable and love it. Well,
now I want one.
Yeah, they're incredible.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. Yeah, they're like a stuffed animal comes to life that says, please love me. Please, please. Okay, speaking of love, you will love. Message from one of this week's sponsors. If you love fantasy football, listen up. You have to join us for this season's hottest and easiest daily contest. You can flex on the competition in FanUp's daily flex ball contest to win cash and the hottest brand prizes. It combines redraft and best ball. There's no salary cap, no draft, no waivers. Pick a new team daily, stack your roster however you like, and you can take me on head-to-head. Sign up right now. Enter before Thursday Night Football. Well, next week. Sunday night games, Monday night, to win FanUp bonus prizes from Fanatics, Battle Against Me, and others all in the season long. Follow your friends, talk smack, see if you can beat them. Get paid doing it. Download the FanUp app right now on the Apple App Store or go to fanup.app. Just be fans. Well, we're just being fans. We're Giants fans of Daniel Jones. Chris, we gave you a little game update. Give us your thoughts on the game up to this moment.
Well, it looks like Darius Slayton just caught a 35-yard touchdown from Daniel Jones here just a couple seconds ago. So it looks like the Giants are back ahead. Now, everything that I'm hearing on Twitter so far, it looks like for folks that have been rostering Antonio Gibson, they might be in for a little bit of a disappointment. J.D. McKissick has played quite a bit tonight. And I don't know, I guess with the way that the football team had operated last season, we should have expected at least some sort of split. Now, I know that some folks were expecting Gibson to take that next step and sort of being that every down back. But I know that was one of the big questions we had coming into this season, what Gibson's workload would look like. If I'm remembering correctly, I think it was actually another shout out to Rich Rebar. That was one of his big questions for the season, along with is Austin Eckler going to get goal line carry, so on and so forth. But what was Gibson's role going to be? And looking like here tonight, it's seeming like he does get the early down work. He is still involved in the passing game, but in the 2-minute goal line, it's still seeming like J.D. McKissick is still going to be pretty well involved, especially since we just saw him run in that touchdown shortly before half. So either way, it looks like we're getting at least an entertaining game from what we all thought was going to be, somewhat boring. To be quite honest, coming into it, it wasn't going to be able to hold a candle to any of the Island games we got last week. But for all intents and purposes, this is actually something of an entertaining game tonight. So I'm actually kind of excited to, catch the rest of it and actually go back and watch some of it if I can, after the show tonight.
Yeah, right. Always the thing about doing the Thursday night show is our split attention. But and look, J.D. McKissick is a good running back. That's the thing. He's good. Now, like you said, Chris, over the summer, there was some talk over the spring, especially that the light bulb was coming on for Antonio Gibson. The game was slowing down for him. He was making valid reads and things like that. They really wanted to get him more involved in the passing game. Of course, he was a receiver as much as a runner at Memphis. But like you said, McKissick's not going to go away. Mm-hmm. And McKissick, he bulked up a little bit this offseason. He's kind of an injury upside stash. Oh, yeah. I try not to use handcuff anymore. He's a stash because if something does happen to Gibson, the other thing about Gibson and why I was hesitant to go all in on him was that last year, except against Dallas, he was just kind of pedestrian for fantasy. Now, if you thought the quarterback play would improve this year and open everything up, then it might not have mattered. And I mean, Heineke's playing all right. We'll see what he can do. Love seeing Darius Lee. Do you think Darius Slayton can still play? I think everyone moved on from him after year 2, and it was really rough last year.
I never quite got that.
They didn't throw deep. Like, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that was the thing. It was like, if you're not going to throw deep, I mean, while that might have been his calling card, and I mean, Daniel Jones can throw the deep ball like with the best of them, to be quite honest. But if I know that once they made this move for Kenny Galladay, it was just, he was completely written off. And during the 2020 season, like, I think he was like probably one of the bright spots, like outside of Barkley, for the limited time that we saw him. Like, Slayton was actually one of the bright spots in that offense.
Yeah,
I mean, we couldn't really rely on any of the other pass catchers within that offense. So I actually enjoyed like seeing him develop as both as a route runner and also as like a downfield pass. I mean, I don't know. I never quite got we got Kenny Galladay, so Darius Slayton becomes the wide receiver 4 in this offense. And now we're looking at him as essentially the wide receiver 2, because I haven't heard much from Galladay tonight. Sterling Shepard is essentially he's working as their wide receiver 1, which, if you've talked to a number of folks that actually look at the wide receivers, I mean, Matt Harmon in particular, he's known like Sterling Shepard has been quite talented for some time.
Yeah.
But either way, it's just, I don't know. I'm happy to see like guys like him like balling out and showing folks that they can still play football and they're actually good at what they do. So I don't know. Yeah,
except for, say, Robert Foster. When a rookie comes in and does what Slayton did in his rookie year, he's going to have a good career. Darnell Mooney, this also applies. So we'll see. But yeah, Slayton can still play. Galladay, and this kind of goes back to the plan they had for him, right? You bring in Galladay, you draft Kadarius Toney, and this is going to help Daniel Jones. Well, we'll see about the offensive line, and we'll see what happens in this game. See what Taylor Heineke can do, because it's his team right now. My team tonight here, Matt Waldman and Chris Allen, and also got to give it a system to mention Julia Bryant for this wonderful image. I'm going to ask you about this.
Sigmund doesn't like me.
Right.
That's what
he has a list, because that was always what I would say, is that Aaron Rodgers has a list of everybody who's ever said anything mean about him. And that's just the kind of dude he is. But let's talk about, and a lot of people said a lot of mean things about Aaron Rodgers and the Packers last week, Matt. For purposes of valuing players going forward, and then we can throw Tennessee in too, because the Tennessee game and the Packers game, the Tennessee game was even worse because it was at Tennessee. But Tennessee and the Packers, it felt like two performances that you shouldn't really read anything into, because it was just so miserable. Is there anything we can learn from how these two teams played on offense?
Yeah, the Packers are not a warm weather team early in the year, because they also had this problem last year. They wilted.
Right, they wilt.
So
the vapors.
They're not a hot weather team. So that's part of it. I think that you have to understand too that Jameis Winston played lights out football. His footwork was dramatically better. That's something that you could see that changed the rest of his game, because that's the setup for everything that you do. And I think the Packers started slow, and they never recovered from that. And so I think they'll get better. I mean, again, when you have a veteran quarterback the caliber of Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady or Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers has said it before, relax, and I think that there's something to be said about they have the leadership to be able to stay calm in these types of situations. No matter what you think about him off the field, I could offer an alternate interpretation, which is this is a guy who takes no manure off of anybody and has firm boundaries about things. And when people say, well, he didn't talk to his family, well, there's the All-American Hallmark commercial. Every psychologist in the United States would basically tell you that in therapy, the people who go to therapy and they're there forever is because they have the expectation that their life and family should be like the Hallmark card commercials on Thanksgiving, and that and they never get over that it isn't. And maybe Aaron Rodgers is one of those guys that realizes he doesn't have that and decided that he's going to move on. And then people, gripe about him because he's rich, he's famous, and and those kinds of things happen. And when, all I know is that, Andrew Brandt let this guy babysit his kids early in Rodgers' career. And unless he changed dramatically, and he seems to talk about that he hasn't, that I would say, Rodgers is a guy that I think is fairly stable, but because he has firm boundaries, he's going to have confrontations with people. And as a result, he may be seen as not a sweetheart to people who are non-confrontational, but sometimes confrontation can be good and it can be productive. And I think he's one of those guys as a possibility. That's just an alternate theory and so I think I'm not so worried about the Packers. The Titans, I'm more worried about because one, Taylor Lewan's got to work back into shape. And yes, the Arizona Cardinals line defensive front with Watt and Chandler Jones, and then you have Zaven Collins and Simmons and Budda Baker. You throw into all that mix. They were pretty darn good. But Lewan is still kind of working back from his ACL tear, and it may take him a little bit. So maybe they'll get better as the season goes along. But for Mike Vrabel to call out Julio Jones and say, that he played like bleep, and then, Julio also had multiple drops. He had that penalty that resulted in that. And then earlier I was looking this up, and Arthur Blank, pretty much after the trade, and, you could go sour grapes, whatever, but Arthur Blank was like, listen, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's a great player. He's going to be in our Ring of Honor one day, all of this stuff. But as time went on, Julio was not the most agreeable sort to be in this building. And he wasn't a guy that was the same Julio in terms of work ethic, in terms of how he worked with other coaches and how he communicated with people that he was at the beginning of his career. And now you're talking about a guy who doesn't seem to be able to practice, and maybe he isn't practicing well when he does and isn't playing well, at least in his first game. I'm a little more worried about the Titans because when you bring in a guy like Julio, he needs to be the tone setter. He's expected to be the tone setter. And if he can't be the tone setter anymore, like Tom Brady was the tone setter when he came aboard, or even you take a Josh McCown when they bring him in out of high school ranks, and he can be a tone setter for a team and help Carolina, that's a big deal. And I'm a little worried about Jones with that decreasing amount of practice time. Then, if this keeps up for another game or two, this could be a bad scene.
Yeah, that could be the right thing to sell your Derrick Henry, your Julio Jones. I can't bring myself to say AJ Brown, but maybe AJ Brown for like 80 cents on the dollar, 75, 80 cents on the dollar right now. Because if they go to Seattle and look miserable again, you're not going to get that. This is the same discussion I had with folks in my buy low, sell high column this week. I said, sell Ezekiel Elliott. Sell him for like 60 cents on the dollar. I don't care because it ain't happening for Zeke this year. Sometimes the best thing you can do is take a loss, the old falling knife, And I think that Tennessee, you're right to say that of the two offenses, Tennessee, it might be that the reveal was that this is an offense that just isn't going to, where's the play action? Arthur Smith, not that Arthur Smith's play calling helped Atlanta. And with Green Bay, they'll bounce back. And real quickly, I'll say something not necessarily nice about Aaron Rodgers, but I was talking to somebody over the summer that has reason to know these things, okay? And without getting into specifics, I'll just say that if you knew more specifics about the situation with Aaron Rodgers and his family, you might not think the way that the prevailing wisdom thinks about it when it is brought up, okay? That's about all I can say about it, but for me to say, hey, back off Aaron Rodgers a little bit, it's okay. It's okay. Chris, is there any, because Bob Harris is on this week and Bob is sage. Bob is like all of our crazy, wonderful uncle. Yes. He said, don't hit the panic button on anybody. He said, don't hit the panic button on anybody yet. Do you tend to agree with that, or is Tennessee or anybody else that you're hitting the panic button on after 1 week?
Tennessee was definitely one of the offenses that after I saw them, it was after watching that game and just seeing that there was nothing. I can't really I can't figure out like what their offensive identity is supposed to be. And it's not like they have a lack of talent. They actually added talent like this offseason. They bring in Julio Jones and all that. And it's just neither of them. It wasn't like Julio Jones and AJ Brown. They weren't even targeted until like their third or fourth drive, if I'm remembering correctly. So it's just, what is this offense like going on? But since you mentioned Arthur Smith and his move to Atlanta, same deal in Atlanta. Yeah. It's like he tried to take the same formula that he had in Tennessee and apply it to the personnel he's got like down in Atlanta. It's not working. Like Mike Davis is not Derrick Henry. Like you can't call second and third down runs like from, when you're 6, 7, 8 yards out and expect him to convert. Not at this age. Like, it just, I don't understand what the process was. Now, I know that at least for you personally, I know that you would have to think that Kyle Pitts after 1 week, not that bad, not great in the stat sheet. Opportunity, yes, that's what we wanted, right?
Yeah,
that's what we wanted. We got that, and so if that's going to continue or at least be a somewhat constant throughout the rest of the season, then okay, fine, we can at least take that and at least be happy with that. But otherwise, we weren't seeing the shots to Calvin Ridley. At least we got it in the early parts of the game, but then after that faded. Russell Gage. I mean, just any of the other guys that are sitting behind him. It's just like, what I don't know. I'm struggling to figure out what this team's identity is supposed to be, because at least in the years past, it was, we could rely on that passing volume to kind of get us through, regardless of what you thought about Matt Ryan. The passes to Julio, the passes to Calvin Ridley, so on and so forth, like those were going to be there, and we can rely on that. But it's just with this play calling, with what the picture of Matt Ryan with his face in the dirt that's been going around since Sunday, it's just like that is what folks are thinking about their team at this point. So yeah, between those are the two teams that I have just the most concern about after Sunday. The one team that I guess that I am still cautiously optimistic about, like, is my Bengals. I guess I'll call them my Bengals.
It was a feel good win. I said feel good win of the week. Good win of the week.
Yeah, and like with everything that had happened, like throughout the offseason, from the trepidation regarding Joe Burrow and him coming back from knee surgery, Jamar Chase and the drops, and so on and so forth, just talking about like everything. I mean, just from the physical to the mental for multiple players on that team, and to see them come out and win in overtime, that was great. And I think that with what we now saw, like with at least somewhat conservative play calling, they didn't have as much passing volume as we hoped that they would, but still they were at least able to get it done. Mixon's ascension now into the RB1, like weekly RB1 conversation without any sort of hesitation. That's what we were expecting. But we're not getting the same passing volume that we wanted for the rest of, at least from a fantasy perspective. So I'm happy to get the win, or happy to see them winning and be able to do that in such a fashion. But it's just, we now have to recalibrate what we're thinking about from a fantasy perspective, because we can start Jamar Chase because we know that volume's going to be there. We can start T. Higgins. We know that volume's going to be there. Tyler Boyd. Yeah. I mean, but everybody else, it's like we can actually kind of talk ourselves into seeing them in our starting rosters from a week to week basis. But it's just, everything else is just like we have to recalibrate for another week or so. So that's why I guess, other than Tennessee and Arizona, yeah, I'm more or less panicking with those guys. Everybody else, let's just wait a week. Let's just sit back, see how things change, like on not tonight, but like, Sunday, Monday, let's see how everything works out. And then we'll come back in week 3 and before week 3 and figure it out from there.
That second data point, recalibrating. What we see in week 1 changes based on what we see in week 2. We go back and we say, oh, that meant something different than I thought at first. By the way, Judy was back when you were talking about Atlanta. Maybe she's telling everyone, calm down about Kyle Pitts, but she left as soon as you started talking about Cincinnati, Chris. So I don't know if that's a bad sign. Maybe she's saying no, but what will keep you calm, a footballguys.com premium subscription. Go to footballguys.com/join. You're going to get everything every week. You're going to get the gut check. You're going to get the injury rounds. You're going to get all kinds of stuff from the great staff at footballguys.com. Money back guarantee. Worry less. Save time. Win your fantasy football league with footballguys.com. We just got a few more minutes left here as we're watching Daniel Jones responding to a field goal, moving the Giants down the field. So, as we're about to go to the fourth quarter, we will see what these two quarterbacks can do. Matt, I guess I'll throw it open to you like this and say, just who are you anticipating? It can be a who, it can be a unit, it can be a team, it can be a game. What are you anticipating when you think forward to Sunday? When you talk about that second data point, like if you could go forward in time, you could get a second data point right now on someone to help you with your lineup decisions, to help people with the advice they need. If you could travel forward in time to know something from Sunday, what would it be?
I want to know if the Ravens running backs and Lamar Jackson are able to execute the more read and option style plays into their run game than what they did last week, because they were very limited in that. And that was their bread and butter for the past 2 years. And so when people say they're going to figure out Lamar Jackson, and you start hearing people talk, and if this doesn't get fixed, you're going to start hearing people say, see, I told you he's been figured out, and they couldn't be more incorrect. What happens is actually that the playbook has been cut down dramatically because the running backs matter in Baltimore. You need to be able to have the rapport to actually, pull and hand off the ball. And that gives Lamar Jackson on first down 3 to 5 gains of 8 to 12 yards untouched to the boundary every week from 2019 to 2020 that he doesn't have, that sets up second and short or another first down and gives them a very wide open playbook. Instead, they went to a spread offense. And when you hear people talking, oh, it's a different Lamar Jackson, he looks better from the pocket. He was better from the pocket. He was always that good from the pocket. He was always that good from the pocket. That's just narrative. If you watched him closely, he was always that good. So the problem is that now you have a shrunken playbook with a worse offensive line, with new offensive linemen who are basically allowing the Raiders to reset the backfield. And if you don't have your bread and butter plays because Lamar hasn't been able to develop a rapport with these new backs, then he's going to be extremely limited. And as good as he is, he's just going to be barely passable if that second data point and third or fourth data, it might take 3 or 4 data points to see it. But if you don't see more zone option type of, zone reads and option style plays in this run game, and they are continuing to go to spread, you want to get out from Lamar Jackson as fast as you can. And I am as big of a Lamar Jackson fan as anyone. But it's just, this will be his worst year if they can't address that. So that's a data point that I think is probably one of the main ones.
Against Kansas City. They're staring down the barrel of 0-2. And 0-2 is just a bad place in the NFL. You don't ever want to get to 0-2, no matter what plans you had for your season. Baltimore is there. Buffalo could be there at 0-2. They're facing Miami on the road. That's not an easy game. Tennessee going to Seattle. These are all teams that not just had playoff aspirations, but Super Bowl aspirations.
Minnesota's a team that, I like what the Bengals did. But I've been targeting Brashard Breeland pretty much all preseason because of what we saw last week. And I'm a little worried about this defense kind of falling apart.
Yes.
And maybe being and Cincinnati being good, but maybe a slight mirage from the excitement. And if Minnesota turns out to be like the Houston Texans of the Clyde Edwards-Helaire game week 1 last year, then, this could be that canary in the coal mine next week. So we'll see.
I've been talking about this, and Ryan Bozer, love Ryan. He's saying, why are you guys talking about Mike Zimmer being a lame duck coach? I mean, sometimes the relationship just goes stale. Sometimes it's just time for everyone to move on. And you get that vibe about the Minnesota defense, about Zimmer, and you wonder, and that's the recontextualizing. And we'll see Cincinnati go against Chicago, who got thumped by the Rams. Rams play Indy. Going back to, the Minnesota defense, though, they get Kyler Murray. Uh-oh. That's not going to be much fun. If Joe Burrow and Joe Mixon were tough and Jamar Chase, it's going to be a long afternoon, late game. So we get to watch Kyler Murray and bask in that. Guys, I really think Kyler Murray, he may well outproduce every other fantasy quarterback by 3 or 4 points a game. I think he could set a new record for fantasy points in a season for fantasy quarterback. So it's just, he has that look about him, and this offense has a look about it. Go ahead.
If Cliff Kingsbury's made the adjustments that we see, as Mark Schofield pointed out on our roundtable this week, he was very critical of Cliff Kingsbury last year because they didn't shift much in that offense. And when you have all that personnel and you don't create matchups and deception and misdirection and force defenses to adjust pre-snap, you have a stale offense, and it doesn't help your personnel at all, no matter how good your personnel is. And this year they have better personnel on the outside, and they're making these types of plays. And those 2 plays that they gave, those 2 touchdowns to Christian Kirk, I mean, they dialed those up for him. And that's the type of thing you wouldn't have seen last year. And so that's very encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the NFC West. I said I got a rise out of people because I said the NFC West arouses me. But it really, I talk about this. I'm going to mention this so many times. People are sick of hearing it. But I wanted to make all 4 NFC West teams have winning records whenever we did those predictions over in base camp. And people said, mathematically, all I know is those are 4 of the best 7 teams in the NFC.
That's
and
because
they look
Jason Wood is an I don't even
hedge
know
fund
if he
manager.
complained about it, but that's because Jason Wood is an NFC East fan.
Well,
And you know, the NFC East is a bunch of posers, you know. So
yeah, that's
kinda how I
true.
put it. I
As
love
bad
you,
as
I
the
just want to
NFC
get a
West.
rise out of you. That's all.
Yeah, no, we love it. We love it. One last note we got to get in here. Football Guys mobile app, the lineup dominator, the league dominator. You need it, folks. If you don't want to subscribe, first of all, you have to be on our daily email. It's free. You can opt out. You're going to get all the stuff from me and Joe and Cecil. But also that league dominator, footballguys.com/league-dominator-mobile. It's like we're looking over your shoulder, okay? You're going to get the projections. You're going to get the lineup advice that you need to win your league at footballguys.com. Chris, let's put a bow on this one. And I'll ask you basically the same question. Time travel. You could travel forward in week 2 and learn something. What's one of the biggest question marks that you want to see turned into some hard data that you can act on?
Oh, I want to know about this San Francisco running back thing. After the debates we've seen on Twitter for the last, 3, 4, 5 days about, is it Elijah Mitchell? Is it JaMychal Hasty? Should we just have not done anything and just stash Jeff Wilson? Can we roster Kyle Juszczyk and just play him instead? That's what I want to know about the San Francisco running back, because we're just so enamored with the amount of productivity from the running back position, like under Kyle Shanahan, that we're just going to grab anybody, right? That everybody's been scrambling to pick up like one of those running backs attached to that offense, even though just last season, nobody wanted to touch Tevin Coleman with the 10-foot pole, but we're just going to grab anybody that has SF and RB like attached to their name. And we're just going to put them in our lineups, either on our bench or in our starting lineup, and we're going to go with it. So I think this has been one of the biggest debates, not just from a player evaluation standpoint, but from a, like, say, fantasy football strategy standpoint about how you manage your team, how you manage your free agency budget, if your league happens to work that way, or if you or how you wind up like making trades or whatever and just pouncing on the moment. And the moment happened when Raheem Mostert went down and we watched Elijah Mitchell rumble for over 100 yards and a touchdown. And now after the Trey Sermon news and him being inactive, but we knew from an evaluation standpoint that he was the guy that we wanted preseason. And of course, I see that there from Waldman, like with Sermon right there. I mean, but it's just we don't know. And Kyle Shanahan has put us in this position where we're having to figure out, which running back that we want out of that group, because we're already between the running backs and then also Brandon Ayuk sitting in the Shanahan doghouse like old Dante Pettis, even though that's not even the same comparison because Ayuk is loads better than Dante Pettis. But still, it's just we have no idea how that personnel in San Francisco is going to be deployed on Sunday. So if I could go forward a couple of days and figure out like what's supposed to happen, is Elijah Mitchell going to be the 1, the 1A, the 1B? Is Ayuk actually going to see more snaps and be that wide receiver we saw for parts of last season? Or is he still going to be sitting behind, River Craycraft and the rest of the guys that are there? That's what I want to know about this, because we just know that offense can be efficient. We know that offense can be productive, and any person on that team can wind up being like that scorer that you needed in order to win your week. We just don't know which one it's going to be on a week-to-week standpoint. So I just want to know which guy. Just tell me which guy, right? And then I'll just go there.
Just tell me, Kyle. Buy the situation, right? Buy the situation. Yeah. And that's the thing. Yes, Lawrence, this is a KBS from Founders. Everything that Founders does is good. Michigan has so much good beer. Michigan has so much good beer. So much good drinkable beer. But yeah, and that's why I understand in the chat room, it was River 74X saying, it's crazy people spending 95% on Elijah Mitchell. No, it's not crazy. I mean, he produced in a good situation that has new opportunity. We only get a few shots of those on the waiver wire every year. I've been telling people again and again, there's only 2 or 3 guys usually that make a difference off the waiver wire every year. So you're not using your waiver wire bucks to get guys that are going to help you. You're using your waiver wire bucks to get guys who have a chance to help you. And then you're looking at the factors converging and saying, is this a guy who it might hit? Might. And that's what we're shooting for. And we have that with Mitchell. We already see that he can take advantage of the situation. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I offer an alternate theory on that one? Because I think you're absolutely right in what you're saying, that for your style of fantasy management, you are 1000% right. But if you're the type of person that knows that, like, for instance, that you have quality talent, but you're just looking for maybe a quick patch here and there, and you can actually win and continue to have consistency as you have injured players and you're not trying to dump and churn your roster unnecessarily, you can pick up unexciting players like Tim Patrick and Zach Pascal and folks like that who actually give you weekly points. And instead of going for the big lottery pick as your RB3, you wind up with a wide receiver 4 who's giving you consistent production each week and keeping you in the winning column when you're waiting for that lottery ticket to hit. And then meanwhile, you still have the waiver bucks when that one does actually come.
Perhaps later in the season.
Perhaps later. And now it does take a style of management to do that. And what you're saying is perfectly valid, because obviously Sigmund Bloom was a terrific fantasy player. I played with him in plenty of leagues to know that. We know that. But there are also people with a different style where that works just as effectively.
Yeah. And look, it's like this, right? Let's just say that you take in a 12-team league, everyone has 100 units, and there's 1,200 waiver wire units, right? Like in reality, there are going to be 3 players that were actually worth like 500 units or 300 or 400. And then there's going to be a whole bunch of players that were worth 5 or 10 or 20 or, putting the Band-Aids on things like that. Yeah, and that's the question. Do you want to try to land one of those guys, or do you want to just
Seahawks? The Seahawks with Russell Wilson, or the New England Patriots, where you get a bunch of budget guys who can do the job for you. Each way has been able to help you win.
Exactly. Spending on those $2 and $3 million veterans that then you turn into comp picks. So it's always interesting, and this is when I almost wish we had 2 hours, blog talk radio style, and we could really get into some of these more expansive topics. But we're going to watch this. The Giants got a field goal. We're going to see what Taylor Heineke can do with a drive, etching himself into Washington lore. Hey, Heineke has a chance to make it so that he's the starter. If this team wins 5 or 6 games before Fitzpatrick comes back, this could be Heineke's team. You've got your team here. Dr. Gene Bramall, me, Sigmund Bloom, Chris Allen. So excited he's going to be joining us every Thursday night. Matt Waldman, footballguys.com. And really the stars are y'all in the chat room. We got Eric Stoner. Someone said the Eric Stoner. Yeah, the Eric Stoner.
Yes.
The Eric Stoner. Yeah. That's right, folks, in the chat room. See what you missed? If you're listening to this show on Friday, you missed the Eric Stoner. You should legally change your name to that, Eric. The Eric Stoner. This is the Football Guys.
I get excited. I get excited about the Eric Stoner.
I do too.
Yeah. How can you not?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He's really he's the man behind the curtain, and you should pay attention to him. But really, folks, we appreciate getting to make this journey with you every year. We're just getting started here at footballguys.com. We love making this journey with you because you're so classy.
I had a scout tell me once, who the F is Eric